Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. My name is Lisa and today we're working on seam 7 for our CQtober project on my autumn pillow top. I'm really happy with the direction that this is going and it's time to choose a seam for today. So I have my little bowl and one just flew out, so I guess we'll do that one. Well, this is a different one. So today we're going to do cross stitch. And I have not done cross stitch on a crazy quilt seam in a long time. This should be a fun one. There's so many things we can do with it, so looking forward to that one. Let's see where we're going to actually be doing cross stitch on here. My original plan has been to do some of these longer seams all in one stitch. So that's not going to be one stitch. Down here is going to be one stitch. This is going to be one stitch. So we have a seam coming off of here, one off of here. I'd really like to get this corner secured, so that might be a good place to do today. It's not a very long seam, and it's got two solid colors, so I think we could actually do a lot with that. Let's do that seam right there. I'm going to carefully tuck that edge under there, and I am going to repin it because I want to make sure it stays down. I've taken out all of these threads because these are threads we have not used on this project so far. And I realize they all have similarities in them. They're all a little more muted. Every time I try them, I find that I'm just not using it. I keep looking at this one thinking I should keep it, but it's so similar to others that I already have. I keep thinking we should keep this in there. And it just never seems to work out. It just looks pale and washed out compared to everything else. And while it would help carry some color through, I think we're just going to eliminate it. And I think it's easier to make decisions if we don't have too much to choose from. So I'm going to take those and we're not going to use those. So my remaining set of threads is here. We've used all of these except the brown and this one. Those two, I think, are ones that we may use. I'm going to leave them in for the time being. I've used all of these so far on this project. They all go really well. Sometimes it just takes a while to kind of figure out what's working in a project and what's not. On day 7, I think we're there. Now, I can always come back and pull something out again if I find I'm not getting what I want. So cross stitch. What colors are going to look nice on these two solid colors? And so I don't want green because that'll blend in with what we have. And I don't want brown because that will blend in. I can use this thread, which is a size 8. We used it right here. If I start with it from the gold end and work this way, I think those variegations with those burgundies and the bright oranges will help with that. It would make cross stitch, which sometimes can seem like a plain stitch, a little more interesting. I think we're going to use this one. I think we'll start with that one, and then we'll see what we want to add to it as we go. So let me get this in the hoop and on the embroidery frame, and then we'll get stitching. I need to fix something. When I basted these seams, I did them with pretty loose, big stitches with the idea that the stitching, the embroidery, was going to hold them down. And what I am finding is that it's not doing the job. I am going to baste this down. I'm going to use some thread that's pretty close to that green, so hopefully it won't be as visible. I don't need to take little teensy tiny stitches here. I'm just coming along and basting that down. You can see how it just tucks that edge down nice and neat. Now, this is something I would prefer to be doing in hand, but I didn't realize I wanted to do it till I already had it in the frame. I think I'm going to be a lot happier stitching on this if this is secured a little bit better, because I don't want that brown velvet popping out from the green. And look how much flatter that lays. If I can ever get this piecing video re-edited, I will include a note about needing to go through and just sew everything down with this little invisible whip stitch before beginning to stitch. I may do that before the next seam because it's just giving me enough issues that I think I would like to do that. There's turning out to not be as much overlap in some of these as I would have liked, even though I felt like I was being really careful with it when I pieced it. So there we go. So that's a nice tight seam. This isn't going to pull out from there now. I'm much happier with that. So that one is not an embroidery seam. I think it was important to do nonetheless. The next thing I need to do is figure out what I want to do with this cross stitch. Do I want to do them where they're all adjoining, or do I want to separate them? Maybe it's time to take a quick look at the stitch book again. I don't think I have very many examples of cross stitch in here. It's going to fall under my miscellaneous stitches. Just don't think I have much because it's not a stitch that I have used much on crazy quilts, and I think I'm just not really drawn to it. And it'd be nice to do something that was a little bigger and showier on that seam. Well, so here's a couple of possibilities. You see this stitch right here. So that's a big cross stitch, and then it's got lazy daisies and some straight stitches. But I sort of like the idea of the cross stitch with the lazy daisies in the middle of it. You wouldn't even have to do a whole lot more than that. So just ignore all the little bead or French knot type designations. Let's try that one. We had chosen our thread, which is this pretty variegated. We're going to make some pretty big cross stitches here. So I'm thinking I'm going to come out about a quarter, 3/8 of an inch on either side there. And I think I am going to start down here in this other block, right here. I want to come straight down from that green corner there. If you're doing cross stitch proper, you're going to go and make all your stitches one direction, then you'll come back and do them the other way. And I think that's what I'm going to do, because I want to try and be really careful with my spacing. I came straight down, and now I want to keep those stitches parallel to one another. I want to come straight across. By doing it this way, we're going to get some interesting variation, and the whole stitch won't be in one color. And I like that idea. Now, I felt like that one, it's slight, but it's going to make a difference. It should be over just a little bit, so I'm going to redo it. Because when you're doing a strong geometric like this, and you have one of them that's off and they start looking narrow, it just won't look correct. So we really want to be careful with that parallel. That looks a little better to me. So I need to think about this. We've got that far apart. I guess we're about right. So I'm straight underneath. I think we're sitting a little higher into the green than into the brown, and that's partly what's throwing me. That's really thick right there. Now this one we're just going to do a partial stitch, and we're going to go up here so that it looks like the pattern completes itself. Otherwise it'll look a little strange. We're going to come back up to that one. So we want to go that way. So I'm going to also take it off at the proper angle here. Now we're going to come down to this one, and we're going to make our cross. So we're going to go up here. Those variegations are really long in this thread, I'm noticing. So if we got those all correct, then the rest of it should flow really easy. I'm going to bring it right to that little twisted lazy daisy in that seam. So there's our cross stitches are all done. And so we just have the straight stitches on the back. So if you've ever done counted cross stitch on cloth for counted thread work, then you know just exactly what it is we've done. So now we need to come in with a different thread. We want a contrast to what we have just done. Let's see what we have that would work well there to make our little lazy daisies. So if we have each cross stitch and we put a lazy daisy in the middle of it, I think that'll look nice. And I can tell you which one I'm leaning to right off the bat. It's either this one or this one. Although look at that one. Okay, we'll pull these all out here. And what I want to do is we're just going to lay a thread out across those. We want to try and get, so we see a little variation. There's that one. There's that one. And there's that one. Which one would you choose? Now, I also pulled out this gold colored one. My initial reaction is to go for this one. I love the brightness of it. So, some of these you look at and there's not a lot of difference. At first I wanted to use this burgundy. It's kind of a paler burgundy, but I think when I look at that, it's just going to get lost. It's going to make that seam all dark and it's going to recede. And so when you look at the pillow top as a whole, you're not even going to see that seam. So we're going to remove that one. I'm not going to use that one. If I use this brighter gold, that's all you're going to see, because the rest of it, again, is going to just recede into the background. So I want something that's going to enable us to see the whole seam without being taken over. So that leaves us with these two, and this one just seems a little flat, but this one brings it to life. So I'm going to use that one. So let me go ahead and get my needle threaded up with this one. And this is a size 12, so using my Bohin 7 needle. They get these little fuzzy ends on them and then they don't thread very well, so I just trim that end off and get rid of it. Let's just see if we can get this threaded. There we go. We're ready to make some lazy daisies in the centers of our cross stitches. I'm going to start on this side, and the reason is I'm not sure how I want to deal over here yet, if we're going to make a partial one. And so rather than trying to figure that out first, I'm going to start at this end where it's easier and work my way over here. It doesn't really matter. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So I'm going to come up pretty close to the center in there. These horizontal lazy daisies are going to be right on the seam. If I'm looking at how long this is, do I want them to kiss? I think I want a little bit of separation. I'm going to make them just under 1/4 of an inch in length. I'm going to work this top one, then we'll work the bottom one, and then we'll work the side one to get us closer to where we're going to be for the next one. So just trying to think thread economy here as I go. Because of that adjoining stitch there, I think I got this one a little crooked, but not going to worry about it. By the time somebody sits on the couch and leans against this pillow, it's not going to make a difference. Trying to get as close to the center of that cross stitch as I can. And there's center. I don't want to quite be in the center, so I think we got there anyway. That's all right. We'll make it work. So now I'm going to come straight across, and we'll do the same thing on this one. It looks kind of like those are going to just barely kiss right in the center anyway, no matter what I do, so we'll just let it happen. I am liking this embroidery frame, but I need a chair that sits a little higher, which is too bad because the chair I'm using is an old chair, and it's got one of those webbed bottoms underneath the upholstery, and it is so comfortable to sit in compared to my other chairs. I do feel like I'm a little bit low. I'm really hoping that our next stitch is one that will be really suitable to a long seam, because we are getting to the point where we need to do one or two of these really long seams. So this is just a simple stitch, but I'm really pleased with how it's coming out. I think it's looking good. As you're looking at this seam, do you think we need to be doing anything else to it? Remember that I'm trying to keep things relatively simple. We have some that are more complex, and I think I'm happy to leave this one as a more simple one on this. So I think we're going to finish this off, and that will be today's seam. I feel like we need to finish that off, so we're going to just make a shorter one, and look, we're going to just come out perfect on thread here. And I think I'm going to come out with one here as well. I'm not going to do that on the top because that seam angles in the other direction. And so I just want to make sure my bottom is roughly even with what I've got coming up there. And it will just look like that pattern continues right on through. There we are. Turn this over and we'll knot it off. Well, I'm pretty happy with that. That's a fun one, and it's really different from anything that we've done so far. So let's take it off and see what it looks like off of the hoop. I forgot to push the button on the overhead camera, and so the only video footage of me stitching the lazy daisies is on the side camera. So I hope you were able to see well enough with that, because I'm not going to pull it out and stitch it again. But I am really happy with this stitch. I think it turned out really well. It's a nice simple stitch, and I think it's a good balance to a couple of these busier ones that we have in here. And that's what I want. I want just that mix of stitches. So now you can see we've got this central area mostly done. I'm really hoping that in our stitches tomorrow or the day after, we get a couple that are good for these longer seams. You know, sometimes you're just not really sure how a project is going to turn out. And all of a sudden we have enough stitching on here that I can start to see what it's going to be like once it's complete. I'm so pleased and so happy with it. Thank you so much for being here with me today and following along as I stitched this simple cross-stitch seam with lazy daisies. I really do appreciate every view, and for everybody who likes and subscribes, it makes a big difference. And for those of you who watch the ads, that actually helps me have a little tiny bit of income from these videos, which really helps right now. Every time you skip an ad, then I don't get the revenue from that ad. Regardless, I thank you for being here and for watching and for giving me all the encouragement and support. And just want to say thank you. Have a beautiful day, happy stitching, and I'll see you in the next video.